She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential Lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do, your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. Pack your bags and ready the coach, because this episode we escape the whirlwind of London for the somewhat less whirly countryside with Eloise Bridgerton. Where is she going? To whom is she going? And why are her fingers always covered in ink? Don't forget you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as @BridgertonPod, and we'd love for you to tweet us using the hashtag WWDDPod. Podcasting is hard and we need your validation. Also, please note, in To Sir Phillip with Love, there is a depiction of mental illness, and we do spend some time discussing the illness and its representation during the course of this episode. If you are struggling, we strongly encourage you to reach out to Beyond Blue in Australia, who offer a number of support helplines and services.
You can tell that I was reading at like 3 a.m. because some of my notes are ridiculous. I just Googled chestnut brown hair for the first time, and realized that I have chestnut brown hair.
You do.
And I didn't realize that my brown hair was the color brown that they're supposed to have. I thought that it was like more... I assumed that it was I assumed it was a light brown that they were talking about. But no, it's a darker brown. Yeah, so this is just to say I am a spiritual Bridgerton. I was like, it might be bedtime.
But Rudy, do you have grey eyes we could drown in?
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. I don't have grey eyes. I have what I would call hazel, but I don't know. But I do remember that there is some controversy about Eloise's eyes, because a lot is made in this book of her having grey eyes. And in an earlier book, she has blue or green.
Oh,
it's one of
green.
It's a continuity mistake, and it gets corrected in later editions, blah blah blah, but it was one of these things.
Or maybe, and I'm just putting this out here, maybe nobody actually looked close enough to drown before, so they were all wrong. But Philip understands. And clearly he is correct, because he's the one who's willing to drown in them.
So I'm Rudy.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Adele.
Our book today is To Sir Phillip with Love, first published in 2003 by Avon Books. The dedication to Paul reads, "And also for Paul, this time because. It's always really because." Eloise Bridgerton is the 5th Bridgerton sibling, and now that her very good friend has married, she's decided to run away to Gloucestershire.
Gloucestershire.
Gloucester.
Gloucestershire.
I mean, I know that Kate's right, because I did look this up, but I just want you to know that the entire time that I was reading that fucking book, every time the word came up, I was like, Gloucestershire. That's how I read.
Oh my god.
To maybe marry a man she's been corresponding with for the past year. That man is gentleman botanist, widower, Sir Phillip Crane. And don't worry, guys, he definitely has all of his teeth, so he'll probably make a good husband.
I think that this book would have really benefited from some of those gothic vibes. Like, you're in a castle in the middle of nowhere, it's rainy all the time. Like, where were our, like, white-dressed women in the middle of the night and unexplained howling from the hallways? Ooh, or, like, portraits where the eyes followed everybody. There was none of that. I think this book could have, like,
just
really...
staff that are creepy and be like... There's none of that. It's just about greenhouses.
They could have really leaned into the gothic, and I feel like Julia Quinn missed a trick here.
Definitely inspired by Jane Eyre.
Oh my God, I really love what you just said about this being a rewrite of Jane Eyre, where the wife in the attic is the idea of the wife as opposed to the actual wife. There's a lot there. That's really interesting to think about, because you're right. Like, Marina is a constant character through the course of the novel, even though, I mean, she's in the prologue as herself and then exists as a specter through the rest of the novel. Yeah, that's super interesting to think about.
There almost needs to be a trigger warning on this book because I think it's constant.
I think it's interesting because JQ she's a doctor, or at least she went to medical school for a short period of time. I feel like she should be more aware of how depression can manifest itself. Like, it's not somebody crying into their pillow every night.
It's also not as constant as Marina's emotional state seems to be. Like, there is not a single moment that is described of her being like happy, pleasant, upbeat. Like, she occasionally smiled at her children, but like from Eloise's memories of her as a child through to Philip's memory of her death, like every memory they have is of her sad.
There's this idea that was introduced later on by Eloise that she never laughed. And it almost sounds like she was like catatonic most of her life. Like, it was quite alarming to me. And the way she was as a child was kind of introduced later on by Eloise to sort of excuse Philip.
Which I thought was super interesting because when I was reading it, like, I realized how long it's been since I've actually read it, to the point where I started to play guessing games of like, oh, it's because this, right? So in my head, as I'm going, I was like, we're getting clues that, I mean, obviously she was engaged to his brother. I thought that the brother had got her pregnant and Philip married her so that the children would be legitimate, and also so his brother's children would be like potentially an heir, like, or child would be an heir. So that's the story. As I was reading it, that was the story I kept expecting. I kept waiting for that bomb to be, like, I kept waiting for that plot point to drop, and it turns out those are his children. So I don't fully understand why he married her, because they don't seem to have liked each other at any point.
Well, I think that it was explained in the book that he did it basically because she was expecting to marry the baronet and he was the new baronet. I mean, it's a weird game of swapsies, really. Although I think this wasn't that uncommon. Like, it's quite unusual that her family would have signed some sort of marriage contract that relied on her, gaining the status of being married to the baronet.
Can I take us right back to the start? On page 26, there's more proof that Eloise and Penelope are gay. Because since I posited that theory in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, I went into this book like looking for signs that Eloise also loves Penelope. Like, she loves her back.
Oh, can you imagine, how he asks her, what were you running away from? I'm running away from the fact that my beloved is marrying my brother.
Yeah.
Has married my brother. Oh,
so
someone has written that fan fiction somewhere, and I feel like we need to find it.
Look, if you have written that fan fiction,
send it to us.
Please send it to us. Because this is like right here on 26. She's talking about how, she's happy for Penelope. Truly she was. And she was happy for Colin too. They were quite possibly her two most favorite people in the entire world. And she was thrilled. And she's really driving home how fucking happy she is that they're marrying each other. But also later goes on to talk about how that, like, she had fully expected to remain a spinster along with Penelope. And maybe they would live together and be in spinsterhood together. And we all know what that's code for.
The two spinster sisters who just happen to,
They're very good friends.
bosom buddies.
So yeah, I just wanted to like flag that. So as we go into this book, that's where I'm at. I'm which means that like maybe I set myself up to fail a little bit, because very definitely there's no plot twist where like she ends up with Penelope, and she also doesn't end up with anyone that is Penelope-esque.
No, and I think that this is a good time to talk about what kind of placeholder Philip kind of is. He's really literally a bit of nothing. He hangs out in the greenhouse and is terrified of his children. And I don't know, he's described as being sort of big and not terribly refined, you know, pleasant enough, but doesn't set her world on fire. He's a good writer after he does 8 million drafts of the letter.
I found that endearing, I'm just going to say. Like, I liked that he made multiple
It's endearing, but I don't know. I just never really felt like we ever got a sense of the character of who Philip actually is, except that, you know, he was a good guy because he didn't cheat on his depressed wife.
But he did try to sleep with her when she was basically catatonic. And he failed to mention that he had children in any of those letters.
I mean, yes.
I feel like I got a really strong sense of who Philip was. And there's like...
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me.
He's someone who hasn't had much joy in his life. So you sort of understand why he gloms onto Eloise, who isn't sad, which is not to say a great characteristic of, oh my God, Eloise is amazing. But if, you know, his whole life has been stuck in that estate, being abused by his father, and then basically finding it, like, not being able to pursue what he really loved because his brother dies, and then he has to marry the widow. Like, he's never done anything because he wants to. So he's kind of shut that part of himself off, perhaps.
It's not really sad, but it's not really personality traits. Like, ooh, I've had a bad life, so I'm just not going to be a person or character with any personality traits whatsoever.
Kate, some of us, for some of us, that's all we got, okay? Like...
Well, I will say I have read this a few times, and I remember liking it a lot more than I did this time. And I did listen to it as an audiobook, and if anything, it made him quite insufferable because I was really having to sit in his words a lot more. So when he's being quite horrible to Eloise verbally, it really took a lot away from him. There's a scene probably at the 2/3 mark where he basically tells her he can't listen to her anymore. Like, she's always talking and the sound of her voice is too much, and she's just got to shut up, basically. And all she's doing is asking him to engage with her in a way that isn't his penis going into her. So
that's when they're married, right?
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I remember the scene because I made a note of it as well.
Yeah. I definitely want to come back to that, but I feel like there's so much that goes on before we ever get to that point.
Well, let's just go through like the plot. So we have Eloise who flees London, you know, to avoid all of her feelings and how she feels about the engagement or, you know, possibly Penelope. And then she arrives at this dark castle where he literally doesn't know what to do with her. He's like, we don't have guests. I'm just going to leave you like hanging out in the front hall because I don't know what to do with you. But then his kids come, don't they? Aren't they the next thing that happened? Yeah,
well, she forces him to deal with the fact that they are causing a ruckus upstairs.
Yeah, that's right.
He doesn't want to because his whole approach to dealing with his children is avoidance. And they are doing this thing where they are like, they're misbehaving to get attention. Eloise, in her like infinite wisdom / Violet channeling, recognizes it immediately. She's like, of course, they are misbehaving because they want your attention.
Actually, it's really funny because I feel like Eloise in this book became Violet. Like, she moved on from being Eloise to, I have kids now, so I'm just going to turn into Violet and be like her mother all over again, which, I mean, is an ongoing fear of mine that we all turn into our mothers eventually. But it really happened, and it happened fast. Like, she went from being sort of snarky and, you know, talking too much and being so sharp and so smart to being, you know, super maternal and all about the kids. And
I think she kind of went from being a manifestation of like Amanda and Oliver and that mischievous kind of underling around the skirts to being Violet the moment she sort of stepped foot at the Cranes. Like, it was a weird transition.
Here's a question that I had, though, because several times they mentioned eels in beds. And I'm like, how prominent were eels? And how easy is it to catch eels? Like, I'm actually super interested in where do eels live? I thought, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I know about eels are the scary ones that live in the bottom of the ocean.
Right?
Can you get eels in freshwater ponds?
Yeah.
Is that a thing I need to worry about going near ponds now?
Kate!
You should be worried about that in any kind of river. What are you talking about?
Well, I don't know. I didn't worry about it before, but clearly I'm going to worry about it now.
As someone who grew up skiing on a freshwater lake, yeah, hell, there are like eels freaking everywhere. That's why I was terrified to like be out under the water for too long.
They actually, I want to say they're like quite curious. Like they do actually come up to you if you are on the edge of like a jetty or whatever.
I know, like the crocodiles and the sharks, fine. I didn't realize I had to worry about eels as well. Ugh.
I don't think Amanda and Oliver were that bad. I mean, they're annoying. They would drive me up the wall, but I don't think they were like genius muckrakers. You know what I mean? Like I just don't.
Which is why I think Eloise being able to handle them made perfect sense. Like gluing the governess's hair to the bed sheets, like horrible, but like not genius level mischief, really. Like really standard, straightforward mischief.
But you think he would have questioned why the current nanny, who we later find out has been abusing them, has not had anything happen to her? You think that would have raised some flags? They don't like her. They told him they don't like her, but she stayed free of an incident.
But yeah, I wonder why they didn't try anything with her.
Because they're scared of her.
Maybe.
I think it sort of lines up with a lot of what we're talking about, like the consistency of the characters from start to finish, like uniformly, is a little bit all over the place. But I didn't find them annoyingly precocious. They were annoying at times, but I felt like it was kind of earned.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I don't normally like kids in romance novels.
No, neither do I.
It's not something that I seek out. I don't like Secret Baby.
I think, like, Oliver and Amanda are great, and I really loved that the Bridgertons sort of adopted them into the family at the end, and there was no question that Violet was their grandmother, and I liked that conclusion, and that Eloise sort of went... I liked that Eloise kind of called herself hers, but I didn't like it when Phillip would call her their mother. So it was this weird disconnect for me. Like, for him, it was so much about having a mother for his children, so he didn't have to worry or think about how he was being shit all that often. So it was a weird sort of contradiction for me.
Well, yeah, the motivations for both of them are quite interesting, because Eloise leaving London and going to this estate to meet someone that she's been writing letters to for a year, like, it is solidly out of character for her. There is no way that she did not understand the full implications of what she was doing. And I actually don't really... We're given a reason for why she doesn't give him a heads up and time to organise a chaperone.
So she can change her mind.
Yeah. So we're given that reason. She's was like, it's so solidly out of character, and I was really surprised that she hadn't, like, roped Francesca into her, like... Again, like, Francesca has recently been widowed, but, like, they're so tight. So I was like, it's bizarre that Eloise, who has these really strong connections with her sister, with Penelope, she's not enlisted either of them to help her with this, like, grand scheme that really puts her at risk, like, in every possible way.
You're completely right, because in the first few novels, you cannot even distinguish Eloise from Francesca. They are just together.
Yeah.
And they don't really have different personalities.
To the point where I thought they were twins, but they're not.
I don't know, actually. I bought it. And I still buy it. her best friend, the best friend she's in love with, is married somebody else. So she gets a little bit desperate, a little bit reckless, a bit overwhelmed, and all up in her feelings. And like, who doesn't flee that scene?
I guess I just expected. Well, like, I was thinking about it, and I was like, the most logical and the most Eloise way to have done it was to line something up with Francesca where she has told everybody that she's going to stay with Francesca, and Francesca covers for her while she does this thing. So Francesca knows the truth and no one else does. And and then like, you can still have the brothers figuring it out and having a full-on fucking meltdown, which was just, it's straight up. It is one of the best parts of this book.
I actually think the brother interactions in this book are the best thing in the series.
I liked Benedict again.
And poor Gregory, who just wants to be a grown-up and like is being treated like a child at every turn.
To add to my theory that Colin and Eloise are actually the same person, and that's why it is not just okay to ship Penelope and Eloise, but it's actually like fucking, it's the right thing to do, is that Eloise is a secret writer with her letters and everything, because she is keeping up an insane level of correspondence with people, and no one seems to know what she's writing or who she's writing to and all that kind of stuff. And Penelope is the one who finds the letter that kind of reveals where she is and that she's with Philip and like where to go, right? And it's much like Penelope is the first one to find and read Colin's secret diaries of secret writing. And like, yeah. So they're the same character. Like, they're the same person. And actually, like, yeah.
Doing a psychoanalytical reading of this text would be super fun.
Right?
Like, oh yeah, like I'm like stretching way back to my undergrad degree, but I've got like Colin is the id and Eloise is the ego in my head right now. And oh yeah, we could I could make this work. I could write a very good fourth year essay on this, is all I'm saying.
One day I'm gonna need you to explain that to me, because I have a really basic understanding of the id and the ego. Like,
love it.
But I do definitely want that paper, please, Kate. That would be awesome.
I'll just whip it up in my spare time.
Yes. Once we get a Patreon, that'll be the first thing that we offer. That's like top tier though. Like, you got to be spending like $50 a month to get that. Like, this is academia coming at you.
Like, make it rain, people. Make it rain, and I will deliver some Freudian thoughts for you.
Like, because how much do you spend on an academic journal? Like $100. So, I don't know. I haven't been a student in a long time, and even then, like, you get university access, so it's fine. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say on that.
I really like Sophie. She's pragmatic. She's just really smart, and it feels like Julia Quinn doesn't like her that much. I don't think she's necessarily acts the way they talk about her. Like, I don't think she's more chatty than any other character we kind of have in this series. They talk about how direct she is. I don't think she's any, like, Philip is much more direct than she is. I guess it's a gender divide. Yeah, I actually really like Sophie. I just don't like Philip all that much. Shit. Did I say Sophie the whole time?
Yeah.
You did. Yeah.
And I was really confused at first, and then I was like, oh, she's got the wrong name.
I've always liked Eloise through Penelope's book. I liked Eloise in this book, and I liked her up until she sort of arrived at Philip's house and then morphed into Violet, which I mean, it's a thing that makes sense. She knows what to do in that situation. She's a fixer. She steps in and she, takes care of things and takes over. And I don't know, I just felt a little by the end of it, and I think it may bleed into how I didn't feel that Philip was ever really a character beyond Eloise's husband. But I felt like Eloise sort of didn't get what she deserved. Like at one point, Philip is like, shut up already. And he's like, this relationship is perfect because you're not sad and you don't get to say anything because you haven't been with a sad person. And I was like,
also, I don't want to talk to you,
friend. Just because you were in a bad relationship earlier doesn't mean that Eloise is not allowed to raise points about how this relationship could be better. And this is the thing about Marina being that constant wife in the attic where she's just hanging over them all the time. And Philip just fucking needs to visit a therapist and get the fuck over himself. So he is not going to be toxic to the next woman he gets in a relationship with, who, thanks to Regency England rules, has to marry him and be stuck with him for the rest of their lives.
If you think about it, it's not that he hasn't just had sex in 8 years. He hasn't really talked to anyone in a very long time because he clearly doesn't have a relationship really with his staff. He refuses to talk to Eloise, probably didn't try with Marina, and just ignores his children. So what the hell? He has no relationships, basically, when we come upon him. Except
so his
for
interpersonal skills are nil.
How dare you guys?
He might be on the spectrum.
He is in the greenhouse with his peas. But he is very definitely on the way to proving evolution theory with peas. And you guys are saying he's got no friends. They're right there. They're right there.
Look, okay. If Philip were filling out selection criteria right now, he would be able to say a lot under his has the scientific backing for this job, but under interpersonal skills and ability to get along with other people, he would be like, no.
But I just want you to understand that it actually speaks very deeply to what he wants in a wife, which is a pea. He wants
silent in a crevice,
silent, fertile. I don't know, I've lost it now, but yeah.
Well, no, it works because he married the wrong pea the first time round, and now he's upgrading to the better pea to see what happens.
Yeah.
Two questions. Would you, based on his letters, chance disgrace? Because I don't think the letters were that outstanding.
Okay, look.
I mean, he said flowers. That was nice.
The letters are actually the Featherington. Yeah, because things Eloise, as of page 30, things Eloise knows about Philip, presumably from the letters. His age, his marriage history, his hair colour, that he has all his teeth, and...
How do you bring that up?
That's my question, right? So that was the first time that I read that. That was my question. And that he's a baronet and a few other things, whatever. And then things that he knows about her, we later learn, also includes that she has all of her teeth. What kinky bullshit are they writing to each other about teeth?
Maybe it's a legitimate question.
I just don't know how it came up.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it was a joke, haha, oh, we want to know what I look like? Well, I've got brown hair, blue eyes, and all my teeth. Aren't I charming and witty and making it? I don't know. I agree with you, but I've said weird shit in dating apps before, so I accept that this is something that could have happened.
Yeah.
Of course, what they do not discuss in their letters is the fact that he's a fucking dad.
Well, I mean, yes. I feel like that should have come up before dentistry, but you have already heard how I feel about Philip to begin with, so yeah.
But also, if he's looking for someone to parent his children because he can't be bothered, you think he would mention that in the letter when he's trying to find a mother for his children. He doesn't even care if this person is set up to succeed, and yet we're told how much he cares about them. It's like he's blindfolded and he keeps walking into walls. He's really quite incompetent. But the other thing is, this guy who can't communicate, who's a bit of an emotional dolt, apparently wins over all the Bridgerton brothers.
By drinking with them. He drinks with them.
I just don't buy that.
Knowing boys, that sounded right. For me, what happened sort of while reading it is that I went through phases of like, it was like, really didn't like it. And then somewhere around about like this halfway mark, maybe, I started to get into it and I was really on board with them. And then we hit that third quarter, which is when they get married, and I was done. I was like, and it's the way that he talks to her. It's the way that she's like, kind of by quite a few people actually, because Violet is also let's remember Violet is also someone who tells her to like stop expecting so much.
That scene about don't push really was hard for me because it reminded me of, you know, people have told me to be like less myself.
Yeah.
That was the thing. Like, it was, as much as it made me sad, it was also one of those things where it resonated real hard. Like, I sat there and I was like, oh, I've been Eloise. Like, I've been told to be less me. Like, so that someone will,
you're too much, you're too intense, you're too,
And it's...
Yeah, we're all Eloise, I think.
But also, he did tell her she talks too much, and that's something we're told as a gender.
But I think that's one of the things that Julia Quinn does so well as a writer, where, you know, I was like you, Rudy, there were things that irritated the fuck out of me through this whole book, and many times when I was not on board with the characters, but there's still always a charming scene that will rope me back in again, or there's a turn of phrase, or there's something a little bit funny, or there's this intense relatability that just keeps me coming back, even though there were times when I was willing to just shut the book on Philip altogether. But I still wanted to know what would happen. I still wanted to know what Eloise was going to say next. I think that Julia Quinn, even when she's not crafting a narrative that I'm particularly engaged in, can still write in a way that is really engaging.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I managed to get through this in a night. Oh, do you guys have a What the Featherington that you wanted to share?
I have something that I want to give a big heart to something, because I feel like I've been quite a grizzly guts. The conversation between Anthony and Eloise when he tells her she's always a Bridgerton, even though he's basically saying you can't get out of this, there is no way out. I really liked that scene. Like, Anthony effectively is most of their dad, not through choice, and I feel like that's like, you're never going to not be a Bridgerton, and why that can come across as there's expectations upon you. It's also like, you're always us. You're always our family. We will always be there for you. We will always have Colin strip your pantry bare. Like, we will always be absurdly competitive with sports. Like, that was really heartwarming. But What the Featherington, the fact that there was so many like the egregious injury to her eye became like, was that their first kiss? Like, or was that the second? Anyway, that she has this major like bruising happening on her face, and there's a smooch, I believe.
I don't know, and she like smells like steak or something.
Yeah,
she's
not sexy.
What is the medical backing behind putting meat on a bruise? Like, what is that? I've never actually looked into it, but it comes up all the time. It can't be pleasant. Like,
she talks about it being sopping, like gooey and not smelling great. So I'm like, I wouldn't want to smooch her.
I have always sort of suspected that the thing about putting a steak on a bruise doesn't really have any like medical backing, but potentially helped because it's typically cold.
The thinking behind steak, at least according to some, so very exact, is that the meat draws out water buildup, which reduces swelling, plus it's cold. So Rudy is correct according to this.
Kate, do you have a What the Featherington?
My What the Featherington moment, I sort of already touched on already, because it was part of that conversation where she's like, here are some valid concerns I have about our relationship. And he's like, you can't have concerns because I'm happy for the first time ever. And also, I can't even remember the words that he used, but it was something like, I'm having a really good time after a super long dry spell. And I was like, what did they use in the Regency period for lube? Because I really hope that Eloise has some and that she is using a lot of it, because the way he is talking, I am like, you are new to this and you better have something that is helping out, because otherwise there is going to be chafing and you are going to be sore, and that is unnecessary.
I think the one sort of dropped aspect of the narrative that I found quite interesting is Eloise was with her father when he passed away. Yeah. And they really didn't address how that's influenced how she lives her life. I mean, it's touched upon and then it's kind of dropped. And I think I would have really liked to see that evolve further. But
yeah, we had to hear about it over and over again with Anthony. But Eloise was there, and it sort of just understood that she's somehow fine and emotionally whole, and in a way that Anthony is not.
I sincerely think that the reason that she's fine has to do with gender and age, though. She was younger, and she clung to Violet at the time, and Violet worked through it with her emotionally.
Yeah,
that's made quite clear.
Holding her hand and talking about their father every night.
Yeah.
Great parenting.
But I would suspect, because we don't really get told, or we haven't really been told at any point, but I suspect that Anthony, being 18 and kind of thrust into this role as like head of the household because he's the oldest man, probably did a lot of like pushing down the feelings, because men don't have feelings, or men shouldn't have feelings. So I think that like because Eloise was younger and a girl, she was allowed to have her feelings and work through it.
Yeah.
In a way that Anthony didn't really get to.
Not true.
But
you're very right.
Look, I'm very astute. It's true.
So wise.
Is there a particularly good reason why Eloise is not open to marrying outside the ton? Because she doesn't seem to ever consider it. When she's reflecting on there being nobody of worth in London, she's really only talking about London society. And I felt like that was one of several differences about, like, if this story had been written now, I kind of wondered if she would be including working class people into her
I still think she's slightly materialistic. If you think about her deductions when she's in the estate for the first time about how everything's a bit threadbare, and her need to get clothes and stuff, which could be an extension of her care for everybody as well. I just don't think it would occur to her. I don't think it was a judgment against her class or anything. I just don't think it would have occurred to her.
Oh no,
I agree. Like the Bridgertons are the cream of the crop, right? And she would just never mix in company outside of the top 10,000. I don't know, it would be like asking why I don't marry somebody in, I don't know, Switzerland, because I never go to Switzerland, so it's impossible to meet somebody from Switzerland.
And whilst you were saying that, I remember the fact that Sophie was her
ladies' maid,
and she doesn't have an issue with that. So that's curious. Rudy, that was a great question, actually.
I honestly think it's not a matter of class warfare and just a matter of no interaction whatsoever.
Oh no, I mean, it was my own thinking of class warfare that had prompted the thought. But it just, I kept playing this game, and it's probably not productive, but I kept playing this mental game of, if this book was written now, these are the things that would happen. These are the things that would change. And that was one of them. And
the depiction of mental illness would have changed, I think. I hope.
I mean, I definitely do think, because I think of Alicia Rye's Hate to Want You, which has the heroine of that book has depression. And that is kind of the difference, that it is someone with depression who gets to be the heroine of a romance novel. Like, Marina could have had a true love. There are other books, but that was one that kind of jumped to mind. And then, what
was the second question?
My other question, just in case you guys have theories on this. So, we learn that Philip's brother was at Waterloo in 1815. And one of the reasons that he's at Waterloo, presumably, is because there is like an extra brother, so no big deal if he dies.
Shrug.
That sounds fucked. Right? So the Bridgertons have 4 boys in their family. And one of
now.
like, and like obviously like not Anthony, but is there a particular reason why neither Benedict or Colin ever enlist?
Draft dodgers. The Bridgertons are draft dodgers.
Well, and I imagine they have enough money to support, like Anthony has enough money to support his brothers without them having to go off and take a commission somewhere. But yeah, it's interesting because realistically, do we ever learn Philip's older brother's name?
Probably.
Okay.
Fucking hell. Sorry, guys.
Now Roger. So Roger shouldn't have gone off to war because he was the heir. It should have been Philip. Like no noble family would have sent off their heir to Waterloo. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a very valid question.
Because I was confused about whether, like, when it was kind of made clear that the reason that his brother had died was because he'd been at Waterloo, I started to be like, oh, maybe Philip has always been the heir. It just was that his brother happened to be the favourite. It's not uncommon.
I mean, there's so much in Philip's childhood that's
inexplicable.
Yeah. Oh my God, how good. I've just come up with an idea for a series of novels that features a time-traveling therapist who goes back into time.
The one, I keep saying the one other, and this is like my 4th one other, is, sorry guys. There is something really interesting about the way that this book fetishizes motherhood. And it's something, I'll admit, it's something I've been thinking about on Book Thinger, where we talk about the way that parenthood, but particularly motherhood, impacts as far as work, impacts as far as lifestyle, like how very little patience other people have for mothers because, because it's such a, because it is it's a boring topic, but it's also an unseen and unspoken topic. Like, the isolation of it doesn't get talked about. Like, all of that kind of stuff. And Kate, you probably have like much better thoughts around this as like someone who's been
as
there.
Our token mother.
as our token mother. Kate, you're a mother.
Yes. Yeah, look, well, see, this is the thing about Eloise becoming Violet that I keep banging on about. I think the word fetishization is really apt in this particular situation because she loses Eloise and becomes mother. And that's part of the reason why Philip, it's a huge part of the reason why Philip falls in love with her. It's a huge part of her finding her, goals in life almost. Like, her purpose is all of a sudden clear. It's to be a mother and raise Oliver and Amanda upright. And there's a lot of subsumation of who you are as a person into who you are as a mother that I find particularly tricky to deal with as somebody who is a much better mother when I have the space and opportunity to be myself. And I find that kind of discussion really interesting because it's pitted against any other types of motherhood. And I think this is the thing that comes out an awful lot when we start talking about the depictions of motherhood, is that there is one way to be a good mother and that your way is necessarily in competition with somebody else's way of being a good mother. That I think is very gendered. And I think it's designed to distract from actual real issues with being a parent in today's society and being a woman that, you know, or rather being somebody with a uterus that has gone ahead and used it for reproductive purposes. But I mean, this is a huge conversation. But yeah, I mean, Eloise totally went from being Eloise the person to Eloise the mother through the course of the novel.
Some of the really kind of concrete ways that we see it is in that she's discouraged from talking. She stops writing letters. I realize that we only are actually experiencing her life in about, like, probably about 2 weeks total. But this is, you know, she is someone who wrote letters to different people for hours each day, and all of a sudden she's not writing to anyone anywhere.
It's like almost they've depicted her letter writing as searching for her family.
And she's also...
And she found it, so everyone else is gone.
All of those things that made her like quite a nuanced and interesting character start to get sort of peeled away because now she's a mum. Now she's got these twins and a husband to occupy her time and her thoughts and her heart. So, you know, what does she need all of these other things for? Maybe that's unfair. Like maybe there are other people who are reading this, like, who read Sir Phillip and just went like all in.
But it is interesting because she's depicted throughout this whole novel as not being able to sit still and not being able to like concentrate on something. But in order to have sat and written letters for hours at a time, like she must have been able to sit still at a time. So clearly she can sit still when she's intellectually engaged in what she's doing. And she is supposed to then find that intellectual stimulation in raising kids. And I mean, I don't want to get down on parenting right now, but I'm going to tell you that the number one thing about being a parent that you learn very quickly is that your children are actually super boring. And being a parent is actually really tedious. And like there are moments that make it worthwhile. Of course there are, but the like day-to-day drudgery of dealing with somebody who can't ask questions or, you know, can't tell you what they're thinking or, you know, only cares about Bluey and what happened on Bluey and just wants to repeat
I'm invested in Bluey as well.
Well, I mean, I don't want to hear the episode recited to me 8 million times. I got it the first time right.
My sister, so I love my nieces to bits. I love giving them back. The thing my sister said to me really early on is she's like, I love my girls, but I need to use more of my brain.
Yeah.
And so she went back to work so she could have adult conversations, so she could be strategic in a non-children sense. And that's, you know, for a lot of people will judge that. And that's also not to say like being an at-home mother is not using your brain and all these other things, but she was so terrified to say that to me. Yeah. She thought I would judge. And,
it's hard. But I mean, as Rudy said, we only see Eloise for 2 weeks. So maybe Eloise has been using up her intellectual energy with trying to solve the problems of Philip and Oliver and Amanda. And once those problems are solved and a suitable new governess is hired, then she'll go back to being able to engage with what she used to engage with outside. And, you know, this is very slice of life for Eloise. So it's possible.
I would agree to all of that, except the fact that she's super close with Penelope. That's been established since The Duke and I, book number 1. You think she would be resuming letter writing at some point with Penelope, like on a minimal level. And like her reaction to finding out, like Violet thought she was like kidnapped and there was going to be a ransom. Like, it doesn't feel like it truly connected as a character beat, like, throughout. Like, it sort of shifts a lot. And I get that she wasn't really acknowledging her hurt in Penelope marrying Colin. Whether she was crushing on Penelope or jealous that Penelope had married, whatever. But I think it's weird that she didn't write to Penelope at some point during that 2 weeks. Now it's time for something we call
What Would Danbury Do?
I just accepted a position with a super competent, badass surgeon single mother. She turns me on. Hard. Should I resign? BD McTattoo.
So you're just throwing away the concept of using the, like, there's a format, Adele. That letter comes from.
Right,
it's okay. No. So that letter comes from who?
That is by Rafe or Raphael from Rebecca Weatherspoon's Rafe, a buff male nanny story, the first in its series.
I mean, honestly, I think Lady Danbury would be like, you know, get it, son. If you're both able to act like adults in this situation and you're both there for it, then yeah, go ahead and mix business with pleasure as long as you can separate them back out again when it needs to happen. I think that Lady Danbury would be super down for a hot male governess. Would he be a governess in Regency?
I'm going to call him a governess, yes.
Oh, yeah, he's the governess.
A male governess that likes picking up his woman. It's competence, porn, child-rearing awesomeness in the form of a gladiatorial, tattooed, bearded hunk of man meat who looks after 2 very precocious twin girls. It's reassuring. It's soothing. They are adults. There is no stupid misunderstandings. And it's all very lovely. And it's a novella, so you can read it in one night. So you're welcome.
I think the thing that I am loving in 2020 is competent characters. Like, give me all the competency porn, because I find reading about people who do not have their shit together so anxiety inducing right now. There is too much going on in the world for me to have like internal conflict at all. Give me all of the external conflicts with people who know how to behave, because it's like soft velvet around my brain. That's all for this episode of What Would Danbury Do? We'll be back in a fortnight with When He Was Wicked. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as @BridgertonPod, or send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri, and Boonwurrung people, and edited by audio producer Rudy Bremer on Gadigal country. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD.